I answered, "If you won't listen to me, I'm not up for this," thinking that my husband's conceited declaration would lead to a divorce. I feel like I don't want to be involved with him anymore. I've made the decision to accept his suggested divorce. He didn't know what lay ahead, but he gazed at me happily. Amy is my name. I live with my spouse and am 35 years old. I have been married for 5 years. Despite our desire, we have not been blessed with children. Because of my husband's beliefs, we finally decided against using reproductive treatments and to wait for it to happen naturally. His statement, "Even if we can't have children, living our lives together is a life in itself," made me feel a little better. We didn't have time to concentrate on treatment because my husband's parents died one after the other shortly after we were married. In all honesty, my spouse has always been a dictator. At work, we used to be a superior and a subordinate. He refers to me as a foolish wife and chastises me severely for any errors I make in front of family. We remained in this connection even after we were married. To say this would be to paint my spouse as a villain, but he is not always cruel. He has complimented me for my accomplishments, and while I was under him as a superior, he would provide me with exact advice and direction during work failures or challenges. One instance that stands out in particular is when he supported me following the death of my grandfather, which strengthened our bond and ultimately resulted in marriage. I left my work to become a housewife after getting married. "Amy, I'm home." "Good to see you again. You must be worn out," I answer. My spouse arrives home later than 9 p.m. Being a manager comes with a lot of obligations, thus he works late nearly every day. "You've had a difficult day once more." I remark, "Thank you for all of your hard work," gathering his socks and garments. Too exhausted to respond, he collapses into the couch and stays silent. His everyday regimen now consists of this. I get to work making dinner so he can start eating right away. He starts eating without making any noise once the food and a fork are ready. He eats for about 10 minutes, and then he goes to the bath. I clean up after the dinner and get him a bath towel and underwear. My spouse takes a bath and then heads directly to the bedroom. He's never been a talkative man, but ever since getting promoted, he seems even more worn out, and our discussions have essentially stopped. He was there for me when I needed him the most, which is why I adore and trust him so much. My mother passed away soon after I started high school, and my father passed away in middle school. I was adopted by my grandfather, who reared me as if I were his own daughter. My grandfather was warm and gentle, and I cherished him dearly. I really wanted to take my grandfather on excursions and have great meals with him when I was a working adult to make up for his kindness. I always longed for my grandfather's health because I had such wonderful memories of our time together. However, 3 years into my career, my grandfather passed away from lung cancer, leaving me completely alone. Though I knew we would have to part ways someday, I never expected it to be so soon. I wanted to do more for my grandfather and spend more time with him. Overwhelmed by grief, I spent many nights crying. It was then that my boss at the time, who is now my husband, noticed my distress and supported me. My husband listened to me and offered comforting words, saying, "That must have been tough. You have done well." I'm truly grateful that he was my superior. Even though he's usually strict, he was particularly warm and encouraging at that moment. I'm convinced from the bottom of my heart that my husband truly has a warm heart. This fact is clear to me, and that's why I sincerely wish to continue supporting my husband going forward. That's how I've been feeling lately, but then something happened. One afternoon, on a day off, our home phone rang. "Hello?" "Yes, hey, it's your brother-in-law." The caller was my husband's brother. "Oh, it's been a while. What's up?" "Actually, I need to talk to my brother. Is he there?" "Yes, just a moment." I relayed the message to my husband, who was relaxing in the living room. "There's a call for you." "Hello? Hey, how are you? What's up?" Unusually, my husband started smiling as soon as he began talking to his brother. He always shows special affection toward his brother, who is 15 years younger than him. His brother got married to a beautiful woman 2 years ago and seems to be living a happy life. But what could have happened? "Really? Is that so? Are you okay?" My husband's tone suddenly became serious. I was curious about what was going on. "Understood. If you're ever in trouble, don't hesitate to say something. You know I'm your brother." With that, my husband ended the call. "What happened?" "Is everything okay?" I asked. "It seems like my brother lost his job." "What? He was fired?" I was shocked. I hadn't expected this. "Yes, I heard the company's situation wasn't great, but to be fired." My husband sat down, disappointed. I couldn't hide my own shock. My brother-in-law is very different from my husband. He's gentle and calm, always humble. He treats me like his real sister, and even when my husband belittles me in front of relatives, he'd say, "Brother, don't say things like that. It will make Amy sad," and apologize to me for my husband's rudeness. His wife is also wonderful, and I have a very positive impression of them as a couple. That he was fired. I wondered how we could possibly support my brother-in-law and his wife. I was filled with a desire to help and support them. "Hey, is there anything I can do?" I asked. Then my husband looked at me coldly. "What can you do?" "Well, I was thinking if there's anything we can do to help cheer up your brother a bit." My husband sighed deeply at my suggestion. "You're really useless, aren't you? You might not understand because you lack social experience, but this is their tough time. Saying thoughtlessly that we should help without understanding the situation is something I'd prefer outsiders to refrain from." His overly aggressive stance made me reflexively argue back. "Outsider? Aren't I part of the family too?" I retorted. "Family? You are my wife, but you have no relation to my brother. Irrelevant, an outsider." His words pierced my heart deeply. It was the first time my husband had been so aggressive. The fact that his brother had lost his job must have been a huge shock to him. However, I thought there was no need for him to speak like that. "Just don't do anything unnecessary," he said before leaving the house. After that, my husband became even stricter towards me. "What is this? You should learn from my brother's wife. What have you been doing at home today?" "Well, at home, my brother's wife manages to keep everything in order and perfectly handles the household chores." I had never seen my husband be so unreasonable before. What on earth happened? "Can you just calm down a bit?" "What has gotten into you?" I finally voiced my opinion to my husband. "Quiet. Everything has become a mess because of you." My husband uttered such nonsensical things. It was incomprehensible. Eventually, we stopped having conversations or even exchanging glances, and the distance between us as a couple grew wider. Gradually, I began to doubt our relationship. On one such day, my husband was packing in the morning, like doing a major cleaning. He sorted necessary from unnecessary items, and garbage bags piled up. I wondered what he was doing. However, our relationship had recently become so strained that I didn't have the energy to speak to him, so I didn't say anything about his actions. Unusually, my husband spoke to me. "Hey, what are you doing? Get ready." "Ready for what?" "We're moving. We're giving this house to my brother and his wife." "What are you talking about?" According to my husband, we were to give our house where we lived to his brother and his wife, who were struggling after he lost his job. "What? What do you mean? Don't do something so arbitrary." "Shut up, don't defy me," my husband shouted at me. However, I wasn't fazed. "Didn't you want to do something for my brother too?" "That's completely different, isn't it? If we're giving away this house, where are we supposed to live? I asked my husband. It's my confusion, he replied nonchalantly. We can think about that later. What's important now is that my brother is facing a severe hardship. He needs the support of his brother right now. My husband was proceeding with things in a very self-centered manner, as if his decision was absolute. However, I knew that my brother-in-law was not the kind of person to kick us out and live in this house boldly. They are not like that. Why would my husband make such a decision? As I harbored this question, my husband said something unexpected to me. If you keep resisting, you're no longer needed in this house, my husband coldly stated. The next day, while I was irritably cleaning my husband's room, I found a completed divorce application. I had never imagined that my husband was trying to end our marriage. I was completely stunned by this unexpected action from him. But somewhere in my heart, I came to understand that this situation might be a meaningful turning point for us as a couple. I felt that there was no prospect of our relationship recovering if I stayed with my husband any longer. Therefore, I picked up the divorce application that I had dropped to the floor in shock and silently signed it. My husband would never dream that I would actually file for divorce. Imagining this unexpected turn of events, I somewhat smirked to myself after signing. That night, I finally resolved to confront my husband. "Listen, do you remember that this house isn't your property?" I asked him. He responded with a puzzled, "Huh?" "This house is where I lived with my grandfather, and the land was inherited from him who has passed away. Did you forget that I inherited it?" My words left my husband visibly surprised. "Considering this house is in my name, how do you plan to transfer it to your brother?" "I'd like to know." "Well," my husband began to falter. "Did you forget that fact? You started living in my house before we were married because you thought paying rent was a waste. I've been paying the property taxes on this house and land every year. You've never once contributed, have you? And yet, you decide to give it away without consulting me?" I challenged him. "No, that's because—" He stumbled over his words. "Enough. Once this application is submitted, the divorce will be official. Then we'll truly be strangers," I declared calmly, presenting the divorce application in front of him. "Wait, let's talk this over calmly," he said hastily. "Calm down? That's my line. I'm appalled that you'd prepare a divorce application so easily. Your selfishness is astonishing." I unleashed all the grievances I had been holding back. I had once loved my husband wholeheartedly and believed he loved me too, but perhaps that was my misunderstanding. I never expected our marriage could end so easily. "Amy, wait. You're misunderstanding something. Let's talk this through properly." "Talk about what exactly? It was you who proposed divorce, wasn't it? I no longer have any love left for you," I declared, carefully placing the divorce application in an envelope. I planned to submit it to City Hall first thing in the morning, using the weekend. My husband collapsed to the floor in dismay. "I never imagined it would come to this," he murmured in a dazed voice. Without any sympathy for him, I firmly stated, "This is my house. Leave quickly. Once the divorce application is submitted, we will be strangers." "It's impossible for strangers to live under the same roof." My husband continued to resist until the moment he left the house, but my resolve was firm. He was now a stranger, and there was no reason for sympathy. Even as my husband pleaded with tears, my heart remained unmoved. Eventually, he left the house, resigning himself to the situation. Our divorce quickly became known at his workplace. He began receiving cold looks, and various rumors spread, seemingly making him lose his place at work. Who spread such rumors? I merely answered questions from his colleagues and subordinates without taking any further actions. Then, one day, half a year after the divorce, on my way back from visiting a real estate agency, I unexpectedly encountered an unwelcome person. It was my former husband, now to be referred to as my ex-husband. It appeared as if he had been waiting for me to come out of the real estate agency. His behavior gave me an eerie feeling as he persistently followed me. Unable to ignore him, I ultimately chose to speak with him. "Enough already. If you have something to say it quickly," I pressed. "Amy, actually, I've been resenting you for a long time," my ex-husband said, glaring at me. "What?" I was baffled by his sudden statement. As he explained, it turned out that my husband blamed me for his brother's job loss. "How is that my fault?" I asked, shocked. "Ever since we got married, misfortunes have piled up," he said. Indeed, since our marriage, his parents had passed away, and he had injured himself, among other misfortunes. However, his father had been hospitalized before our marriage, and his mother had always been frail. Moreover, his injury was due to him falling while drunk and breaking his wrist. Entirely his own fault. Despite this, he seemed to believe I was the cause of his misfortunes. Learning that my husband blamed all his bad luck on me left me utterly astounded. "So you hated me because you thought I was the cause of your misfortune? I forgave you thinking you were just clumsy, but you actually resented me?" I asked, disappointed with his attitude. He always blamed others, a truly self-centered person. Without any basis, he just blamed me and others. I couldn't understand how he managed to hold a managerial position at work. I worried if his subordinates were also unfairly blamed for unreasonable reasons. When had the man I once trusted changed into such a person? I couldn't help but feel pity for having married someone like him. "But since divorcing you, bad luck has indeed continued," he added. "What kind of bad luck specifically?" I asked. He rolled up his sleeve to show me his scarred skin from burns. "Actually, there was a fire in the apartment I lived in 3 months ago. Not only that, I also lost my wallet, and I've been making mistakes at work. Moreover, things haven't been going well with my brother recently, and we haven't been in contact." In other words, his misfortune continued even after our divorce. It was no surprise. Even hearing about his troubles, here's your text punctuated and organized into short paragraphs. I couldn't muster any sympathy for his misfortune because all of it was a result of his own actions. It had nothing to do with me. "Please, Amy, I want you to come back. I'm nothing without you. Remember, we were together as a couple, and when you were working as a salary man, I supported you in many ways, right? And when your grandfather passed away, I was there to support you a lot," he said, trying to guilt-trip me. "The misfortune you're facing is the result of your own actions, right? Why don't you reflect on yourself? You should really do something about your bad habit of always blaming others," I told him and walked away. "Amy, wait," he called out, trying to stop me, but I pretended not to know him and disappeared into the crowd. About a week later, I received a call from the person who used to be my brother-in-law. "Amy, I guess I can't call you sister anymore. Actually, I have something to talk about regarding my brother." According to my brother-in-law, the decision to give our house to his brother was made unilaterally by my husband. My brother-in-law and his wife knew nothing about the plan. My brother has always had a tendency to show off, and I've been worried about his personality for a long time. The way he treated you, Amy, was terrible, and it was painful to watch. As his brother, he said he truly was a kind-hearted person. I wonder why there's such a difference in personality between the brothers. I don't know if it's my place to say this, but I feel you made the right decision by divorcing. I hope you find happiness, Amy. Thank you so much. That means a lot to me. Later, I heard that my former brother-in-law fortunately found a job quickly and seemed to be managing to make ends meet. I was truly relieved. I've decided to keep some distance from my brother. It seems my brother-in-law had his own thoughts. He mentioned gradually reducing interactions with his brother, who was my ex-husband. This was why my ex-husband had lost contact with his younger brother after the divorce. Being distanced by his closest brother, my ex-husband found himself in a state of loneliness. I hope one day he can understand the consequences of his actions. Before that, I have to completely disappear from my ex-husband's life. On the day I encountered my ex-husband, I had just signed a contract with a real estate agent to rent out the house I inherited from my grandfather. The house was too large for me to live in alone. However, I couldn't bear to part with the house filled with memories of my grandfather. I hoped to let someone who wanted to live there use the house. I changed my phone number and address, cutting off all ties with my ex-husband. Life still holds many possibilities for me. After all, I am only 35 years old. My name is Lindsay. I'm a 29-year-old company employee, and this year means I'm getting older. Still, I met Jake, a year older than me, through friends, and we decided to marry 6 months after we started dating. Jake, who made a name for himself in tennis during his student days, is an active person who continues to play tennis even now. As I was in the tennis club during my student days, we immediately found common ground together. Once we started dating, we would often play tennis together on the weekends. One day after our date, Jake proposed to me, and we decided to get married. It's been almost 3 years since we got married. We don't have children, but we bought an apartment after getting married and have been living together ever since. Both of us work, and while we aren't struggling financially, we can't say that we're wealthy either. We're living a happy life. However, something happened that shattered my peaceful days. One day, Jake suddenly asked me to come to his parents' house. Surprised, I hurried there to find Jake, his parents, and an unknown woman waiting for me. As I struggled to understand the situation, Jake suddenly knelt down and said, "Lindsay, I'm truly sorry. The truth is, I've been involved with this woman here, Olivia. Last week we found out that Olivia is pregnant. I feel responsible for her and the baby, so I think it's better that we separate. I'm sorry, but I want a divorce." Jake shocked me with this revelation. Exposed to his infidelity, the pregnancy, and faced with his demands for divorce, I was stunned. That was when my mother-in-law spoke to me. "Lindsay, please forgive Jake. Yes, he cheated, but the problem lies with you too. You and Jake weren't really a good match from the beginning. So, I'm sorry, but please forget about him." My father-in-law added, "Olivia's father is an executive at a major company, a man in a totally different position from someone like your poor father. I think you know who's more suitable for our son." I couldn't believe it. Jake's father belittled not only me, but also my father too. Normally, parents would put the blame on their son for cheating, but Jake's parents didn't seem to think that way. Instead, they seemed to think it was natural for us to divorce, and that their son had done nothing wrong. I took the divorce papers and said, "I understand what you all want to say. Being with people who have such warped thoughts might affect me too. I'm shocked at how you make it seem like I'm the villain despite Jake's infidelity. Don't worry. I'll file these divorce papers myself. I'll leave the rest to a lawyer." With that, I quickly left the scene. As I left, my father-in-law mockingly said, "A poor person hiring a lawyer? What a waste of time and money. When she doesn't even have any, she shouldn't bite off more than she can chew." Ha ha. Ignoring him, I left his parents' house and immediately went to City Hall to file the divorce papers. At least I was able to end my marriage with Jake. The next day, surprisingly, Jake and Olivia came to my apartment. Seeing me, Jake said, "Oh, you're still here? You haven't even packed your things. You're taking your time, aren't you?" Hearing this, Olivia also looked at me curiously. I was furious at Jake's words. "What are you talking about? You're the one who should be taking it slow. This is my house, so you should be the one to leave. The movers are coming soon to take all your belongings to your parents' house. If there's anything you don't want them to touch, you should take it now, I retorted. Hearing this, Jake suddenly panicked. What? This is my house. The ownership should be in my name, he exclaimed. I was dumbfounded. After all, this apartment was bought in my name. I had already told Jake about this and about my family's background before we got married, but it seemed that Jake was the type to conveniently forget things that didn't suit him. Perhaps this carefree nature is why he was easily swayed by Olivia. I showed the deed to the apartment, and my name was clearly written on it. Jake's face quickly changed upon seeing it, while Olivia's face began to cloud over with anger. Jake, what is this all about? This is completely different from what you told me before. Were you deceiving me? Olivia began to confront him. This is strange. What's happening? Jake responded in confusion. That's not an answer. Explain yourself. Olivia pressed on. First, this is my house, so please take your argument outside. And just so you know, Jake has various debts, so if you're planning to marry him, be prepared for that burden. I calmly stated the facts to Olivia. Hearing this, Olivia seemed about to say something, but I didn't care, and kicked both of them out of the room, slamming the door behind them. After a while, I could hear them arguing outside the door, but it eventually quieted down. About an hour later, the movers finally arrived and took all of Jake's belongings to his parents' house. The room was now clean, and I was relaxing in the newly organized space, but it was short-lived. Suddenly, the intercom rang repeatedly. I cautiously opened the door with the chain lock still on, and my mother-in-law was standing there. Hello, is there something you need? Why did you keep such an important thing a secret? She asked. What are you talking about? I can't believe it, but Jake just told me that this apartment is in your name and that your parents are the owners of that famous restaurant chain. It seemed Jake finally remembered my family circumstances. What about it? If I had known, I would never have let this divorce happen. A daughter from such a wealthy family. We would love to have you back in our family. Lindsay, please reconsider and start over with Jake. I was shocked and at a loss for words at her outrageous request. I couldn't possibly agree to what she was asking. You really have a terrible way of thinking about things. Am I not a human being? Are you only interested in money? I'm sorry, but I don't want anything more to do with you. There's nothing more to talk about, so please leave, I said, and attempted to close the door. But my mother-in-law, infuriated by my attitude, raised her voice in anger. Don't be so arrogant. I'm giving you my permission to reconcile your differences. Fix things with him right now. I won't leave this spot until you agree to get back together. Open this door immediately, she shouted, pounding on the door repeatedly. I decided that I couldn't handle this alone and called the police. They came and took my mother-in-law away. Even as the officers were taking her, she was shouting something loud, but I no longer cared to listen to her words. There was a reason why my in-laws were unaware of my family's business background. My father, coming from a poor background, continued to live modestly even after becoming a company president. He never considered buying branded clothes. He always took great care of his belongings and used them for a long time. Hence, at our wedding, he wore a suit he had bought decades ago. Seeing this, my in-laws assumed that my father was not financially well off and misunderstood his restaurant chain as a small privately owned business. As a result, they never delved deeper into my father's business. Time went by without them understanding the true circumstances of my family. Days after managing to send my mother-in-law home, Jake tried to persuade me to reconcile our differences. His persistence was incredibly exhausting. It was surprising how insistent he was despite the fact that he was the one who proposed the divorce. He seemed to have a talent for quickly forgetting inconvenient truths. I opened the door, keeping the chain lock on, and Jake, upon seeing me, began to speak with teary eyes. "Lindsay, please, let's give it another try. Everything is my fault. I'm truly sorry. I still love you. Let's be together again." He then explained a sudden turn of events. Olivia had apparently approached Jake, aiming to get his house, pretending to be pregnant to sway him. However, once she learned about Jake's considerable debts, she gave up and fled. Now, Jake was coming to me to seek reconciliation. "Huh? What are you saying? I don't know anything about that. How can you say that after you cheated and brought up divorce? Now that she's left you, you want to get back together? There's no limit to your audacity. I have no intention of getting back together with you. Don't ever come here again." I refused Jake right there and then. Surprisingly, he quietly left. However, this was not to be their last attempt. Days later, Jake's entire family unexpectedly showed up at my workplace. They were shouting, "Bring out Lindsay! Get that woman out here!" causing chaos in the office and leading to the security guards being called. I stood there dumbfounded by the situation, but they wouldn't have things their way any longer. I worked at the headquarters of my father's company, and that day my father was also in the office. All of my colleagues supported me. "Hey, what are you doing? This is my company. Don't just barge in and make a scene. I know everything you did to demean my daughter. Don't ever come near her again and never set foot in this company again." My usually calm father shouted furiously at my ex-in-laws. Everyone, including the employees and Jake's family, must have been surprised at the anger of my father, who usually only shows his gentle and calm side. Sorry. We're really sorry." Jake's family desperately apologized. My father's stern words had immediately quieted them down. As they were being escorted out by security, my father shouted in a strong voice, "Don't you ever come here again and never do something like this again. I won't allow it. Do you understand?" Hearing this, I couldn't stop myself from crying. I felt a deep sense of gratitude that my father had gotten so angry for my sake. Later, through the company's legal advisor, I decided to seek damages from Jake's family. I sought damages for the divorce due to Jake's infidelity, for his persistent attempts at reconciliation after the divorce, and for the disturbance at my workplace. The total amount was substantial, and I eventually received payment from them. I also made them sign a written agreement promising never to come before me again. Jake's family's state of affairs rapidly declined thereafter, chased by the money owed to me and Jake's existing debts. They ended up selling their home and moving far away from town. The story spread that Jake had committed adultery, divorced his wife, and after being abandoned by his mistress, attempted to reconcile. Facing such embarrassment, they could no longer stay in this town. While I felt a bit of sympathy for them, I also knew that everything was a consequence of their actions, so it was clearly deserved. Jake's family never appeared before me again. Finally, I was able to resume my peaceful days. However, my father had harsh words for me regarding what had happened. He blamed me for not recognizing before the marriage that Jake was a person who would commit adultery and accrue debts. Certainly, while Jake was at fault, my lack of insight was also partly to blame. Unable to argue with my father, I felt disappointed and disillusioned with marriage. I felt that I needed to give my heart a break. About a year later, I decided to marry my colleague, Matt. Matt was sincere and earnest in his work, trusted by everyone. I was initially attracted to his personality, but as we started dating, I was also drawn to his lifestyle. His life was surprisingly simple. He never indulged in branded items, used everyday things for a long time, but generously spent money and spoiled me on dates. His behavior was very similar to my father's. My father, who usually saves money, would splurge on family trips, bringing us joy. I deeply loved and respected my father, and realizing Matt's actions were similar to my father's made me feel that I could be happy with him in the future. Therefore, I decided to marry Matt. I was worried about being scolded by my father for remarrying within a year of my divorce, but his reaction was surprisingly positive, probably because he had heard of Matt's reputation at work and knew of his character. There was nothing bad said about Matt, and from my father's perspective as the company president, Matt seemed to be performing exceptionally well. "I feel confident that Matt will take good care of you, Lindsay," my father told me happily. Matt and I were happily married. Not long after our marriage, we discovered that I was pregnant. The happiest person to hear this news was undoubtedly my father. I was so glad to see my father happy. Reflecting on my time with Jake, where we didn't have children even after 3 years of marriage, it seemed like a stroke of luck. Matt and I plan to take over the company in the future. We are currently learning the basics of management from my father. Although there are many challenges, we accept that they are our responsibility as successors, and we are working hard together. We believe that we will need even more effort for the sake of our upcoming child. Despite all that's happened, I am now very happy together with my family. We intend to firmly support this company in the future.